Episode 21 of Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc anime titled The Headless Star has just dropped, and it continues on with the events at the end of last week's episode as we see the aftermath following Kinpachi's battle against Gremi. Episode 20 featured a lot of streamlining of content, and it appears as though this week's episode follows a similar trend, but with one major difference. There is a fair amount of anime exclusive material within episode 21, and it honestly really surprised me. Before the intro, the anime adapts a scene from a few chapters ago that wasn't adapted into earlier episodes, which reveals to us Yhwach awakening from his sleep. In addition to this, we have an all-new battle sequence between Ichigo and the Bambies, which was beautifully animated, in addition to some reworked manga material which allows for Mayuri to have more screen time, as well as seeing new visuals of AIZEN, and lastly, the arrival of Chad and Orihime within the Serete is improved upon within the anime. Despite these additions, there is still a large amount of material being adapted this week, with episode 21 adapting from the midpoint of chapter 579 all the way up until the end of chapter 586. So in total, we have 7.5 chapters worth of material adapted, which is about one chapter less than last week. Now I'm going to discuss the pacing of the episode, as well as briefly talking about what material ended up being cut and the staff who worked on this episode. So be sure to stick around until the end of this video, where I will be discussing some important news about next week's episode. So without further delay, here are my thoughts on the latest installment of Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. This really was an intense episode that once again had flown by, because so much happens within its runtime that the episode ended up feeling like 5 minutes instead of 23 minutes. The Headless Star begins with a sped up version of the strange Yhwach origin scene that we had seen from the beginning of episode 14. We then cut to material from chapter 565, which is a brief scene where Yhwach awakens from his slumber as he thanks everybody who had given up their lives for his sake so that he can rise again to see another day. This signals a new phase of the battle, where the Quincy leader will now be taking up more of an active role within the story, as we see him set his sights on the royal palace later on in the episode. Following the intro song, Kinpachi's brief encounter with the Bambies is streamlined and slightly improved upon within the anime, as the sequence of a couple of events is swapped around in order to improve the flow of the story, allowing us to be properly introduced to each of the Bambies, as well as letting Kinpachi have a little bit more screen time before he is eventually taken out. One of my favorite moments from this episode is Ichigo's arrival onto the battlefield, with Rukia and Byakuya acting as the setup to the entire moment, as they sense the arrival of a very familiar spiritual pressure crashing into the Serete. The music in this moment is super upbeat, and it helps to build the hype of the entire situation, along with the amazing art and animation, which really ends up capturing the scale of the distance that Ichigo has traveled and the speed at which he is moving at, as the anime staff showcase him breaking through the sound barrier upon his approach to the Serete. Now we do see the blue sky of the Soul Society outside of the Serete barrier, which I think was an amazing addition to this episode, because it confirms that the barrier around the Serete has the Quincy shadow cast over it, which has caused the sky to turn red. So in effect, it's an artificial sky. A lot of people were complaining that this was instead a stylistic choice made by Taguchi and the anime team in order to change up the color palette for the sake of it. But with the visuals that we've seen this week, we can confirm that the barrier has actually been overcast with an artificial color. So hearing the remix version of number 1 along with the sound and visual effects had really elevated Ichigo's arrival onto the battlefield. He ended up breaking through the barrier of the Serete, which had resulted in a skull-shaped cloud of smoke to appear as the Sternritter react in horror to the number 1 great war power returning to the battlefield. The voice acting here was flawless, as we hear Ichigo interact with Kinpachi, with Ichigo's arrival revealing to us the title card of the episode, The Headless Star. This entire scene was super impactful, and it had me excited to see Ichigo start fighting. Thankfully, we didn't have to wait too long, as he starts to make quick work of the Bambies, who learn that they are up against the number 1 threat from Yhwach's 5 great war powers. The battle between Ichigo and the Bambies gets serious, with Candice really letting loose. The way that her blue reishi is animated is incredibly blinding. The visual effects just look mind-blowing here. The animation and art honestly honestly continues to blow my expectations away, especially after Ichigo draws both of his blades. Aside from Ichigo's arrival into the Serite, another scene that really impressed me was the anime-only sequence where Giselle, Lil Toto, and Meninas reveal their holy forms, and each of them get a chance to showcase their powers against Ichigo. The lighting, colors, visual effects, and animation during this anime-only scene was definitely one of my highlights for this episode. I was watching this battle sequence on repeat, seeing the creative powers of the Bambies, with Lil Toto's abilities easily being my favorite amongst the girls, because they had reminded me of Chain Chomp from Super Mario Bros. Additionally, I loved how each of the Bambies had used Sclaverai to gather Reishi while in their holy forms. This adds to the power system that is utilized by the Quincy, and the anime really does flesh it out. These small additions that are being made to the anime really do make up for some of the cut content from the manga. Now that I've spoken about the powers of the Sternritters, I think that it's time to share some of my thoughts on Ichigo's new and improved Getsuga Tensho. The anime adapts this straight out of the manga, adding to the source material with the accurate coloring of the Getsuga Tensho, combined with the sound effects and the subtle motion that Ichigo does to unleash his signature attack. Now Ichigo does a light swipe of his blade across the air, which allows him to effortlessly negate Candice's Galvano Javelin. The way that Ichigo softly says Getsuga Tensho is such a nice touch too, as it signals a new form of this attack. Now another highlight of this episode was witnessing Ichigo utilize his all-new ability Getsuga Jujisho. This has been a highly anticipated moment for anyone who's a Bleach fan. I'm confident in saying that a lot of us were wanting to see this adapted into anime form. Ichigo utilizes the incredible Getsuga Jujisho in order to counter Candice's electrocution attack. Now he activates the ability by swiping his blade across the air, similar to how he had done with the Getsuga Tensho, but this time he uses his second blade to swing down on the line that he had just cut through in the air. The anime exaggerates the proportions and the camera angle here, paying particular emphasis to Ichigo's second blade as he pulls it back and swings it down with immense force, creating this amazing cross-visual effect as it fires right towards Candice, who arrogantly thinks that she can take the attack. Having the attack make contact with her reveals the true destructive power of Ichigo's new technique, as we see her arm has been completely destroyed. Now I don't know what I had liked more, seeing Ichigo arrive on the battlefield, the Bambies using their holy forms, or Ichigo's Getsuga Jujisho. There were honestly so many incredible moments from episode 21, and I was not expecting them all to hit the mark so well. The Headless Star wraps up with the Shinigami confronting the Sternritter and Ichigo rushing to see Uryu just as he leaves with Hashwad and Yuhobak in order to make their way to the royal palace. It is definitely an impactful finale, and it leaves us off on a nail-biting cliffhanger. Now what makes things a bit more unbearable for us is that we don't have a preview poem for the next episode, and this is because Bleach is on a break next week, as they will be airing a recap episode which will be covering the events that have occurred thus far from Core 1 and Core 2. Now this is most likely being done so that the production team have a bit more time to work on the remaining 5 episodes of Core 2, and this is similar to what had happened with Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, which also ended up going on a break but for 3 weeks instead of 1, and this was only after airing 5 episodes of Season 2. The difference with Bleach is that the final episode of Core 2 is going to be a 1 hour long special, so the anime staff have a lot more work to do in comparison to what they did with Core 1. So I hope that this 1 week break will allow them to deliver their best work for the 5 remaining episodes that have yet to be aired. Episode 21 featured the arrival of Istar Mista on the animation team. This is pretty huge as he is responsible for some excellent animation cuts on Black Clover and Boruto, so no doubt that he had contributed to some of the dynamic cuts of animation that we had seen during this week's episode. Additionally, we have Katsuhiro Takagi and Torinosuke Hori, who have been known to be working on Core 2 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, and we've had confirmation that they did in fact provide cuts for Ichigo's battle against the Bambies, and I'm assuming that Torinosuke Hori's visual effects animation really did add to some of the amazing anime-only scenes that we had this week involving the activation of the Bambies' holy forms. Both Takagi and Torinosuke are known for their amazing work, and they really did deliver on this week's episode. Well, that was episode 21, The Headless Star. Personally, I enjoyed this episode a lot more than I had expected to, and it was a welcomed surprise from last week where I had left feeling a little disappointed. I tried not to go into this week's episode with the same level of expectation that I had last time round, and honestly I really found myself loving the changes that were made to this episode in comparison to the manga. In my opinion, the art and animation was excellent here. I loved the Getsuga Jujisho, as well as the #1 remix when Ichigo had arrived, and the Bambies anime only fight scene. Now what aspects of of episode 21 did all of you really enjoy? Was there anything about the episode that you didn't like in particular? And what are your feelings about Bleach being on a break next week? Are you glad that the anime staff have more time now to cook the last few episodes of Core 2? Now, just as a final reminder, episode 22 is titled Marching Out the Zombies, and it will be airing on Saturday the 9th of September instead of its originally planned air date of the 2nd of September. So I look forward to reading all of your comments as we are about to enter the mind-blowing portions of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, which really do need to be expanded upon within the anime. So I'm very excited for the remainder of Core 2 and beyond, and I look forward to reading all of your comments on this week's episode. Lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for my in-depth manga versus anime breakdown of the new Bleach episode in my follow-up video, which I will be uploading tomorrow.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.